lovers. I am so blessed and honored to be in a position to share, tools and tips and tricks that have the potential to heal and to bring you to a place of full sexual embodiment. And one of the tools that I absolutely love and have been using for the better part of a decade are crystal yoni products, including pleasure wands and yoni eggs. And I was so excited to recently come across a brand called Wands, Wands. I met the founder here in Austin and I absolutely loved who she was. I love getting to know the people behind the products that I like to use. And I just loved her mission to really support women and men to explore, celebrate, and honor their sexuality. I felt this transmission of slow, sensual seduction in all of who she was and all that she brought to the world. So I went ahead and gave it a try. I purchased a blue quartz Emerita wand, and the Emerita wand is great because it has this like cool bulby end on it, which is designed for G-spot and cervical stimulation, but can also be used for prostate stimulation. So it's great for men and women and can even be used between partners. So I'm so honored to have built this relationship with her and to be able to offer you guys an amazing discount code. So if you use the code Leola, Leola, that will give you 15% off all products. And the website is wands.com, WAANDS.com. And we'll go ahead and link that in the show notes as well for you. So thank you so much for listening. And also you're welcome for the inevitable pleasure and healing and ecstasy that is coming your way with these products. Let's dive into the episode. Welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this divine knowledge to make its way into your ears and lifestyle. Today on the podcast, I have Jeremy, who is an author, speaker, and podcast host of the recently rebranding podcast, J Curve, which we'll get into what that means because there's some magic and medicine in that name. But I'm really excited to have Jeremy on the podcast, have some masculine energy here. I met Jeremy through a leadership training that I did this year. And I don't know. It was just like, I really felt like he understood me, had my back, and he also just is doing dope shit in the world. And so I was like, let's have a convo. Let's share this energy with the world and the internet. So I'm really excited to have him here. So Jeremy, why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about what you do and how you discovered this passion and purpose?
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me. So excited to be on your show now because we already have a baby out there.
Yes, that's right. I was going to mention that. Yeah. So there is an episode on the J Curve. It will be like rebranded as that as well,
yes.
Right?
It's on Health, Wealth, and the Self currently, but we're doing a little rebrand right now. But Leola
probably by the time this comes out, it will be the J Curve.
Yes. Wow. So yeah, thanks again for having me. So excited to be here. Hello, everybody. And are we talking origin story right now? Is that where we're going?
Yeah, let's hear about how you got to be this cool guy.
Yeah, of course. I'm honored to be considered cool. So thank you, Leola. So it's really funny you asked me this question because I've been reflecting on my life, quote unquote, life story for, the past few months, right? And how I wanted to articulate that to people. And it all started out when I grew up in what some people might call the quote unquote ghetto, right? And I never looked at it that way. I was one of two white families in the entire neighborhood.
Wow.
Look at that however you would like. But I didn't really see it that way. And I had friends that wouldn't want to come to my house. They wouldn't want to hang out with me. They wouldn't want to come to my neighbor to hang out because I lived in the quote unquote ghetto, as they would say, northwest side of Chicago. And that wounded me, that people didn't want to come and hang out with me. So I found myself trying to be someone I wasn't just to get people to like me, going out of my way to get people to like me. And we had a friend of the family, somebody I looked up to and I idolized. He was like the nucleus of the group. He was, he got the girls out drinking, partying all the time, played starter on the football team.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be like that guy. And so, like I said, went out of my way to try to be someone I wasn't. My mom would always say, Jeremy, you're going out running the streets, as she would say. So I was hanging out with kids that weren't necessarily the ideal company, but it was something that I needed to do. And I'll never forget this. My father, it stuck with me to this day. He would say, Jeremy, tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are.
Wow.
And every single time he said that to me, I hated it because I knew he was right. I didn't listen to him. Like, I found myself in handcuffs multiple times growing up. And fast forward to high school, I was a swimmer, water polo player, and I was good. All state qualifier, and nobody cared. None of I can count on one hand how many people came to my games from, like, my peers. Obviously, my parents and stuff came to my games.
Yeah.
We were good. We were ranked. Nobody cared. Like, we weren't invited to parties, quote unquote. And I would just be like, okay, how do I get there? How do I get to those parties? Because I was so obsessed with that, with being liked, right? And it just led me down this path of just like living a double life, basically. Mm-hmm. You know, just being somebody, wearing this mask my whole life. And that's all I really cared about, was how can I get people to like me? And then fast forward to college, I'm playing water polo in college. It was a great time. And again, I was just focused on this life of going to parties, drugs, like hunting women to try to, up the numbers, you know what I mean? And that just led me down this horrible, horrible journey, which is great because it's beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. And
I found myself in a relationship, and I finally looked in the mirror one day, and I was just like, something's got to change. Mm-hmm. Something's got to change. And then I discovered personal development. I discovered raw foods. I was raw vegan for about a year, which completely changed my life. And not raw vegan anymore. But
Wait, why did you shift then?
Why did I shift?
Yeah, it's such a controversial thing. I'm just curious.
Well, first of all, like, I gained a bunch of weight. I was living this life, like, in a job I hated. And then a friend of mine introduced me to this raw vegan coach, and I was all in, right?
Yeah.
And then it's such an interesting question because I hired a trainer in San Diego, and he was a carnivore. So he would just constantly give me shit for being raw vegan.
Yeah.
And I found myself, like, I was in great shape. I was, ripped, had a six pack and everything.
With the raw vegan.
With the raw vegan lifestyle. And I just found myself plateauing in the gym. I wasn't getting strong anymore. So I was like, I got to try something different. And at that point, like, the animal-based diet was getting mainstream at that point, the liver stuff. I tried liver like a handful of times. I can't do it. But I found myself getting stronger again. Am I perfect? No. I found myself eating in excess because when you're a raw vegan, you can eat whatever you want, basically. You can just eat in abundance, just fruit. If you're eating fruits and juices and you just, like, don't gain weight.
Yeah.
So then when I pivoted over to eating animal products again, I gained a bunch of weight because I was eating in abundance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to try something new, and I feel like raw veganism and detoxing has its place.
It does.
And I found myself just, like, in this, like, purity, like, healing loop, which I know a lot of people can relate to, just getting stuck. Oh, I got to continue the healing. I got to continue the healing. I got to continue the healing. And I would, like, find myself judging people or being worried about being judged for going back on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not, like, I found myself not wanting to post on Instagram because I was like, I wasn't raw vegan anymore.
Yeah, this whole circumstance sounds like an exact mirror of all the other shit. Exactly. Yeah. Like, but I also had a similar experience where I wasn't quite raw vegan, but I had massively cut out animal products for like 5 years. And it was really supportive to that chapter and that part of my spiritual growth. Yeah. But then as I started integrating more of my full spectrum humanity, including like primal nature and like death and like understanding those concepts, I started eating meat again. And now I'm paleo, and it's like, what used to be very supportive was vegetarianism, and that did help me to a degree. And then going paleo, though, like, my body needs meat. My womb is like happy in that, like, everything has gotten healthier because of that. So there's no right or wrong way. I think it's just
right.
knowing what's best for you at each part of your journey. And I might be in a space where I want to be vegetarian again because that's supportive to that chapter. But right now I need the grounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if I were ever sick, if I would ever had some sort of chronic illness, I would probably just start fasting and juicing and eat a lot of fruit.
Yeah.
Just to get that stuff out, you know? That's a whole other story, my raw vegan journey. We
can skip over that. I just wanted to double quickly. But anyways, how did you get here? Let's continue.
Yeah. So then I discovered this path of personal development. I began studying philosophy. I began studying religion. I began studying quantum physics. I began studying Taoism, which is something that we connected on my show.
Yep.
And like, I knew what's beautiful about all those things is there's a lot of contradictions.
Love it.
I love that. You know, I don't like this dogma, like the dogma of raw veganism, the dogma of religion, the dogma of science. Like, no, there could be a place where they can all meet in an intersection. So after studying all these different fields, I found that there was a few intersections that they all met at.
Yeah.
Right? I won't go into all of them, but two specifically is that we are powerful beings and we are even more powerful when we're together.
Yeah.
So now it's been my mission just to create an environment where like education, how to thrive as an individual and as a collective is not only easy and attainable. Well, maybe not easy, but education how to do that is attainable and sustainable. So now I'm at this point where like when I started to surround, now let me back up. These last 3 years of being on this journey was not a straight line.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of pitfalls, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, going back to where I was drinking a lot. I wasn't back on the drugs, but like drinking a lot, dating, serial dating. Like I haven't been perfect. And that's something that I know we wanted to talk about today with leadership is embodiment, right? And like creating a space of truth and integrity. So I'll tell you that, hey, it has not been a straight line from A to B.
Yeah.
Right? So now it's just like the catalyst was surrounding myself with people. Like there's power in proximity. Like, who do you want to be like? And surrounding yourself with people, like if you're the weakest link in your or the strongest link in your chain, you need a new chain.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And something that has stuck with me for the past 2 years, and I'll wrap up my origin story, is I went to a men's retreat 2 years ago. And the person on stage, his name was Bishop Dale Bronner. And he started painting the picture of a beautiful metaphor. And the metaphor is this. When a man dies, he has 6 pallbearers that carry him to his final resting place, to his grave, right? This man does not get to choose who those 6 pallbearers are.
Because he's dead.
Yes. So 6 pallbearers carry him in death. He doesn't get to choose, but he does get to choose who carries him in life.
That just gave me like a wave of chills down my body.
So my intention for myself and for people around us is to find those 6 pallbearers. And how can we be pallbearers for each and every one of us?
That's so powerful. And I love weaving in the concept of death into conversations like this because it's something that we so often want to avoid because it feels scary for a lot of us, but it is this inevitable piece. But our death is really measured by our life in a way. And so a few things that you spoke into that I'd love to share more or go deeper in. One of those was, first of all, it was just Father's Day. And I love that you shared like this piece of wisdom from your dad. And I want to share one from mine. My dad's, the one sentence that he always said to me was be a leader. And every day he'd drop us off at school and he'd be like, be a leader day, be a leader day. And I really took that to heart. I actually really did feel that. And interestingly though, at the same time, I've had this moment of recognizing that my dad was also very good at saying, I'm proud of you and things like that. And we didn't have a perfect relationship by any means. In fact, we're still healing that relationship. But he would tell me he was proud of me, but what he was proud of that I did was me being things that actually weren't totally what I wanted to be or aligned with. I was just being whatever I felt would get the praise from society, from my parents, whatever. And so for me, like, I kind of had an inverse where like I really showed up, like I was like in all the clubs and communities and things, in student council and like straight A student, but I was doing it for someone else and not for me. And it never really was fulfilling. And just last night I hosted a women's gathering here, and it was focused on sexuality and womb healing. And, you know, I had the space all set up, and Andrew, my fiance, came down and he was like, I'm just so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And it's not the first time that he said that he's proud of me either, but for some reason, like, it was the first time that I really received it. Yeah. And it really landed because I realized like, oh, I'm doing this for me and also for the world, and it resonates, and it's actually me. And I'm really loving that, like, it took me stopping doing the things, or not focusing so much on doing the things that other people would be proud of for me, and instead doing the thing that like I would be proud of. Yeah. And doing that naturally sort of attracted the 6 pallbearers of sorts, or the community that carries me through that. So
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And like, I was literally just talking about this yesterday, which is beautiful, about just like having your identity tied up into what someone else thinks for you. Yeah. And then you just attach yourself to that. Like, if it's just like, my parents have expectations of straight A student, of straight A's, and I don't get straight A's, then I just feel worthless. Like I'm a failure, you know? So just like removing that attachment and like letting that go. And I love the fact that you finally received being proud of. Yeah. Right? Andrew said he was proud of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Came full circle. And the really cool thing too is that, you know, Andrew and all of these people in my life right now that I consider just like incredible humans, I wouldn't have them come into my life if it weren't for me being my full self. So Andrew, my fiance, I met at a workshop that I was facilitating. If I hadn't have had the courage to like create my own definition of what's worthy of being proud of, then I wouldn't have met the love of my life. I wouldn't be so fulfilled in my work. I wouldn't be in this house. I wouldn't even know you, because actually Andrew encouraged me to do the leadership training where we met at. And I think that this is just a good moment to even just like instill in this aspect of proximity. And a lot of it can be easy to get stuck in the victim of, well, I don't know those people, and how am I going to get in those rooms, and like, you know, whatever. Like, we paid to be in those rooms. We invested in the mentorship. We invested in experiences where we knew we would be in rooms with people that were leaders. And that can feel super edgy, making that investment. But to me, that's the first step. And I know that within my business, there's tons of ways to get into that proximity if Tantra and that path is calling you. But I know that you have some really juicy things as well. So I'd be curious to hear more about like, where are you now, and what does that look like now for you?
Oh, wow. It's so beautiful, because if you asked me that question a year ago, it would have been a much different answer. Yeah. 2 years ago, much different answer. So now I'm getting into the space of, or I am in the space, I should say, of human evolution and somatic trauma release. And creating that community as well. I work with a beautiful woman leader. She's so inspirational. Like, I look at her as a friend and a mentor, Brittany Mundito, and we have a company called An Arm's Reach. It's so beautiful. So her father, his initials are ARM, and the concept of an arm's reach, and he is her hero, right? The concept of an arm's reach is everything is within an arm's reach away. Yeah. Healing, transformation, community, it's all right there if only we just reach out for it. Yeah. So we have a program starting. It's our flagship program. It's Alchemy Mastery, mastering the breath, mastering your voice, mastering your body, and truly loving yourself unconditionally, and just getting and loving your uniqueness, expressing your own uniqueness, and how can we create change in our life. So I'm super excited about that. That's coming out in a couple weeks now. And with that, we're going to be hosting workshops all over the nation. Our goal is 3 workshops this year in the United States. and then taking it from there. She's on a great path right now. She just had her first TED Talk, has another one coming up. So we're co-piloting this thing together. Right now we're focusing a lot on the youth and future generations.
Love it.
We actually just got accepted to the New York Board of Education to educate high school seniors on how to create change, be more aware, reduce stress before they go to college. So that's amazing in and of itself. And our method is so, so beautiful. I'm honored to be even a part of it. Just got trademarked, and it's recognized in the spiritual and somatic space. And it's called the ARMS method. And I could dive into it if you'd like to. But yeah, we're doing 2-day workshops. The ARMS method is very simple. It's how to create change in your life. And every big decision that you've ever made in your life, anything that changed the trajectory of your life, anything that caused transformation, exponential growth in your life, if you look at it, if you like sit down and observe this moment, you have done these 4 steps. And the 4 steps are quite simple. So the A represents awareness. The first step in any change is awareness. And I love this topic because I was just talking about this yesterday. So awareness is simple, right? Awareness is simply just noticing.
Yeah.
Just like extreme presence, right? And so we teach awareness, right? And how would you define awareness?
I would define awareness as just a sense of knowing, particularly self-awareness. Is that what you're more focused on in this specific situation? Yeah, to me, self-awareness is to be self-responsible, to be sovereign and autonomous in understanding like where you're at, and being willing to be courageous in owning your shit as well. Yeah.
For sure. 100%. So you jumped ahead a little bit, but that's okay, which I'll get to.
I love it. She's ahead.
She's ahead. So awareness, simply noticing. The first step in any change is noticing.
Yeah.
And then the next step is responsibility.
Oh, there it is.
Taking extreme ownership, right? Yeah. And how many people go through their entire lives without taking responsibility? One of my favorite quotes, I believe it's a Confucius quote, is, "He who blames others has a long way to go on their journey. He who blames himself is halfway there. And he who blames no one has arrived."
Love it.
So to me, that's the journey of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like not everybody, a lot of people point the finger their whole life, right? And then when you can finally get to a place where you're pointing it at yourself, that's a good start.
Yeah, and pointing the finger can also look at, it can look like, it's the government's fault, it's this party's fault,
yes,
it's my parents' fault, so many different ways. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so it's taking responsibility. And then when you can get to a point where you're not pointing at anybody.
Yeah.
Like, this is life. This is the human experience. If we can get to that point, we're in a great place.
Yeah.
So the responsibility aspect is huge, because I'm not sure if you've heard of Aaron Abke, but he was on my show. Great guy. He's an Austin guy as well.
Sweet.
And I had him on my show. His philosophy or his teachings centers around spiritual intelligence.
Okay.
And I asked him this one day, or on my show, I asked him, how would you define spiritual intelligence? And he said he went through his life thinking spiritual intelligence was just awareness, right? But you could be aware of doing something wrong. You can be wrong, right?
Yeah.
And still do it anyway. Like, I know drinking is bad. I still do it. I know eating fried foods every day is bad. I still do it.
Yeah.
I'm just
giving examples.
I'm not eating fried food.
Naughty.
And I wouldn't judge you if you did. Okay.
Yeah.
So he felt like that was inaccurate.
Yeah.
Right. And I fully agree. So he came to the realization, and I teach this now too, that spiritual intelligence or emotional intelligence is awareness plus integration.
Yeah.
Are you integrating this knowledge?
Yeah. Does this behavior or concept align with my highest intention and truth for my life?
Absolutely. And like you see a lot of this in our space today is bypassing, is going to course after course, reading book after book, going to coach after coach, and then there's no integration, going to seminar after seminar. I mean, I saw it working with Tony Robbins. Like you get this high from the seminar, and then there's no integration after that.
Yeah, and also, what's the point of doing all of this if you're not bringing that magic to the world and using it to make the impact? You know, there's people out there that need you with your 7 breathwork facilitation certificates, you know, but you're still sitting at that corporate job and then saving up for your next Tony Robbins or whatever, you know.
Again,
I see that a lot too. Yeah.
Smoke and mirrors again, right? It's just like, are there there's smoke and mirrors in this space, and it's sad. Like, so where is the integration? That's my goal, is to teach people how to integrate that. Yeah. Right. So we have the A, awareness. We have the R, which is responsibility. And then the M is making a different decision. So a lot of times that just means doing the opposite of what you've done in the past. Yeah. Typically. And then when you make a different decision, that will change the trajectory. So different decisions equal a different reality. Yeah. And then finally, the S is, can you guess what the S is?
I want to actually, can we go to the M for one other second?
Please.
And then go to the S?
I would love your feedback on all this.
Because I kind of think, so I like the make a decision, but I don't totally resonate with make a different decision.
Okay, tell me more.
Because I think that you could actually decide, I want to do the same thing, but do it more intentionally. And be really cautious of, well, the why behind doing something is so much more than the actual doing of it, in my opinion. So an example could be like, okay, we used open relating as a example on your last podcast, so I'll use it here too. But let's say like I'm feeling crunchy because my partner we're in an open relationship of sorts. He had a connection with another woman, and now I'm feeling triggered about it. And I could go through the process of, I'm aware of why this is happening, and then I'm taking responsibility for the fact that I chose this relationship, and now what do I want to do about it? Making that decision, I could decide, okay, cool, I'm gonna change the relationship agreements with my partner, or I could decide, actually, like, I can reframe my relationship to this experience and still move forward and do the same sorts of things. But I guess you are still kind of looking at it different. Yeah. So maybe it is still making a different choice. I don't know.
Yeah. I see what you're saying though.
Yeah.
You're making the different decisions, just going at it intentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel
it's just a thought, but.
Yeah. And I feel like I kind of breeze over the responsibility aspect, but I could just wrap that up really quickly. It's like, I got here and I get to get myself out of this. Yeah. I own this. This is on me. Right. And then the different decision is like, I love that you brought up intention, because that's something that I had been lacking my whole life. It's like going in with intention. What is my intention? And just getting crystal clear on that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But yeah, I would say you can make the same decision with intention. It's still a little different.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Totally. So what is S? I can't think of what it could be.
So if you think about the steps to creating change in your life and making that different decision for exponential growth, ultimately there has to be some sort of trust.
Mm-hmm. Surrender.
There you go.
We got there.
So like, if you just reflect on any sort of decision in your life that changed the course of your life, you follow those 4 steps. Yeah. And it's so, so beautiful. And you mentioned earlier about my new podcast called The J Curve.
Yeah, let's go into it.
Yeah. And so this method applies to what I'm also teaching on my own side of things. Mm-hmm. That's just a little bit about what I'm doing with my partnership. And I'm so excited about that, teaching kids how to do this, teaching, anybody really, how to create change in their life. But some people might be like, oh, why are you rebranding again? You know, health, wealth, and self is pretty cool. It is. And I thought about it one day after speaking with a friend of mine who's in branding, and he had me zoom out. It's there you go. Proximity. Who are you surrounding yourself with?
Yeah.
Like getting people to zoom out and think big picture. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes, yes, it's nice to focus on what's in front of you. Yes. Not saying that's right or wrong, but zooming out is something I haven't really done before. And he asked me, he's like, Jeremy, so what do you ultimately want to do in this world? Like, what would you be speaking about if money wasn't an issue? Not saying it is, but like if money is out of the equation, you're the number one show in the world. What are you talking about? And I was like, human evolution, personal growth. That's what I want to talk about. And we landed on the J curve. Now, what the J curve is, if anyone's familiar with economics or stock, if you just imagine a graph, it's an initial loss followed by exponential gain. It's a J.
The shape of a J.
Yeah, on a stock graph, right? So my brain just starts clicking immediately and running with this. Like, okay, I've had multiple rock bottoms in my life. How can we embrace and love these rock bottoms in our life to create exponential change?
Wow.
So if we just look back at that framework of awareness, responsibility, make a different decision, surrender, the down curve, right, is that's where the awareness and responsibility kicks in. And then the upswing is a different decision.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you're going to be surrendered. I mean, you surrender that. There's trust that everything's going to be good, taking a different course of action. So now that's, like I said, that's unlocking things within me, like to really have people learn to love these rock bottoms.
Yeah, and I can hear someone saying, what if it's not the J curve though? What if I hit the rock bottom and it never goes back up? In my opinion, it's kind of your choice whether you have that J curve in the end or whether you kind of drop into your breakdown and then fall flat and stay flat. Obviously, you know, not every decision is going to turn out exactly how you expected it necessarily, but it's about taking the pain, the suffering, the breakdown, the challenge, the soul initiation, and alchemizing that into rocket fuel, turning your pain into purpose, right?
Right. Exactly. I love that you said rocket fuel because that's my logo. It's going to be a rocket.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I felt it. Just channeled it right in.
So it's really, really cool because I've spoken and thought about these quote unquote rock bottoms a lot.
Yeah.
And like that moment looking in the mirror, I can't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but just like, I was just like looking in the mirror. I'm like, I don't even recognize that person. Like popping pills, smoking weed, like drinking every single night, like lying to my girlfriend, fiance. Like I was like, this is not where I want to be.
Yeah.
And that was my massive awareness and ownership moment. That was my rock bottom.
Yeah.
Then I began to change my life through my research, through making a different decision, through trying this raw vegan path, through looking into philosophy, looking into science and quantum physics. And my life I would not be standing here right now, sitting here right now, talking to you if I didn't make that different decision and had that element of surrender.
Yeah, and it's interesting how these rock bottoms can also weirdly bring you in proximity to the people that you need in a way. So for me, I was in a relationship that like really wasn't right for me. It wasn't resonating. And at the same time, it was like the best relationship I'd ever had, which is often how it goes. You know, it's the best relationship you've ever had until your next relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And so this partner, like we just clearly didn't have the same worldview and it was very contradictory. And, you know, he was drinking a lot and it was just very, very messy. But he loved me and I loved him and I thought that could be enough. And I ended up kind of cheating on him because it was like someone came into my life that was so clearly like not even like my life partner, but even like slightly better. Right. Yeah. And it's like, and so it wasn't like, oh, I want to dump my partner and be with this guy, but it was just like, oh my God, like this is resonating so much better. They say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And this is something that I really, really resonate with. And as I've invested in living a tantric lifestyle, my relationships have evolved and become so much more juicy and liberating. And I believe that this is something that everyone deserves. However, finding these people can be a little bit challenging at first. And so it is my mission to create more spaces for people to find individuals that are resonant with the tantric lifestyle, that are really resonant with you, the listener, the person who is investing their time into living a life that is expansive and liberating. So with that, I'm committed to creating more and more safe spaces for people to discover their desires and practice their boundaries, to connect in community, to celebrate and to grow together so that we can all step into a more authentic version of ourselves and experience truly unconditional love. So we have Tantra retreats for men, women, couples, singles. We also have a female-only retreats, just for the ladies stepping into their divine feminine. We have play parties. We have Tantra workshops, Tantra yoga, women's circles. We've got all kinds of really powerful in-person events. You can find all the details at www.talktantratome.com/events. You can also just go to talktantratome.com and click the events tab to find out about all the latest and the greatest. And if you're wanting me all to yourself, I can't blame you. I also host private retreats for both individuals and couples. Those are one-on-one. You get me all to yourself. And I'm available for private Tantra workshops and performances. And this is great for events like your birthday, or maybe a bachelorette party or a bachelor weekend. We can talk and create something that will be extra special just for you. So I cannot wait to connect with you in real life. But for now, thanks so much for your patience with this brief interruption, and let's get back to the episode. So interestingly, I had realized that the reason why I cheated was because I really wasn't honoring myself and my truth. And again, I was in that pattern of being what someone else wanted me to be. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw my fiance going through something similar, although he didn't cheat on anyone, but it was like a similar kind of sketchy situation, I was like, oh, I see what's going on. Like, you actually don't think that you're worthy of the thing that you actually really, really want. And so you're lying to yourself and everyone else in the process. And it's creating this huge mess. And it actually worked out really well for us, because originally I was like, I don't really want to be involved with this person, but he took total responsibility for it without me asking any questions. Like I just kind of known from other people in the space, but he took full responsibility and without me asking, and kind of shared everything that happened. And we weren't even dating yet. He was just telling me as a friend, like, hey, I'm going through a really hard time. I fucked up majorly. And thank you for just like being here, basically. Yeah. And that actually that vulnerability became the foundation of our relationship. And then I was like, you want to hear the worst thing that I ever did? And then I shared my whole story of what had happened. And it's interesting because in the past I might have put him on a pedestal, but because of the vulnerability of his experience, I connected with it and he connected with mine. And we were able to be really, really real with each other in the end as well. And I mean, this is just kind of coming into a different topic of the power of vulnerability. But he is now that, like you were talking about your friend and the proximity and how he inspired you. And it reminded me, I'm launching some new programs over the summer, and I was like toying with names of things. And Andrew's the person that I go to with my names. And he's like, that sounds awful. No. And then finally, after several days, every morning over breakfast, I'd be like, okay, here are my new name ideas. And finally we landed on one for this specific program that's going to be called the Higher Love Club. It's going to be a membership. So this is my first time mentioning it on the podcast or anywhere really. And I don't know when this podcast is coming out, so it might already be out, but that's the origin story of the name. So,
I love it.
Yeah, where do we flow from here?
I was just going to say, isn't it so fun naming things? I don't know.
It is. It is. And yeah, like sitting with it and meditating on it. And that one, like, I have a lot of ideas come through, like either right before I'm about to fall asleep or first thing in the morning. And so in my routine, I've booked in spaciousness, especially in the morning. So I often stay in bed for like 20 or 30 minutes after I'm awake to just be with my brain and like whatever comes through. And I remember just looking out the window at the sun and being like, God, I really gotta get a name that fits. And Higher Love Club just like dropped right in.
That's so good. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned about the unworthiness aspect of like the thing that you want the most, what you are getting it, or you're not getting it? What was the example you just said, you shared?
I think that what you're referring to is when I was in this other relationship, I was being who he wanted me to be in a way and who others wanted me to be in a way. And so I don't know, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't it.
I could basically
say it again.
I could basically just relate. I think I know what you were saying, but like I found myself in a relationship at one point, and like what I want is love, right?
Yeah.
And this person is overbearingly giving it to me in like the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
And I felt myself self-sabotaging, like I didn't deserve it.
Yeah. Okay. The worthiness piece.
Yeah.
So, okay. So in this relationship to my fiance, and I can't really speak for him and his experience, but we've talked about this topic on the podcast before. So I feel comfortable sharing to the degree that he shared in my experience of him. But like, my experience of him before we started dating was that, you know, he was suppressing a lot of his sexuality and a lot of his full range humanity because he didn't think that it would be welcome. So instead, that was just lodged in his shadow and was projecting out into other relationships unconsciously, especially when he had this dark night of his soul when his father died and like he felt really abandoned by community. And then it was like everything snowballs, and then it's suddenly like the shadow is out to play and we're not really consciously interacting with our world in a way. So yeah, he didn't feel, my impression was he didn't feel worthy of fully embodying all of himself. So he covered that part up, and it was actually just in his shadow. Is that what you were kind of referring to?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I feel like that's like a nice kind of segue into just talking about like the embodiment piece, like as a leader.
Yeah, let's go.
Right? Like, and I know initially when we wanted to do the show, we were talking about what it means to be a leader.
Yeah.
A visionary leader.
Visionary leadership specifically.
Right? And like, ultimately, I mean, when I think of that, I think of the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to leadership in general is embodiment, right? I touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, well, integrity plays a part in that as well. Yeah. Am I practicing what I preach? Am I smoke and mirrors? Am I saying one thing and doing another? And it's so interesting because I love when things come full circle. And one of my, and it's hilarious thinking back. This like simple saying came from my friend in college, and it's very simple. Whenever a decision is coming up or you make some sort of declaration, I am going to lose 10 pounds. I am going to work out every day. Yeah. I am going to start a business. Whatever that means, or whatever your declaration that you're making, just respond with these 5 words, okay? Say it or do it. Right? And I found myself in my experience in my leadership training that I found myself saying a lot of things and not doing it. Yeah. Right? And that's not what a leader does. Right? There needs to be embodiment there. And like that's where I was going to go with that. One of my favorite quotes is by Epictetus. He's a Stoic philosopher. Yeah. And he says, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. So it's basically a much more elegant way of saying, say it or do it. Yeah. Right? Well, how are you showing up? How are you when nobody else is looking? I remember listening to something like the classic shopping cart experiment. Like people who don't put their freaking shopping carts away. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Put your shopping cart away, right? Are you cleaning up the pee on the toilet seat? Yeah. You know what I mean? So how are you when someone's not looking? Like there was a cool like little thought that Joe Rogan had one day, and he was like, imagine there's a documentary crew filming you 24/7. Like this is your story for when you die. Like what are you doing every single day?
That's great. I love that. It's also hilarious, which he is.
Yeah. So now I think about that often is like, what am I being back to intention? Am I being intentional with my time, with my decisions as a leader? And so the embodiment is such a huge piece. And once you start getting more tapped into yourself, into your body, you can start seeing it in others.
Yeah.
And start picking up on the fact, is this guy for real?
Yeah.
Is he or she practicing what they preach? And I feel like I'm finally getting to a place where I could sense that pretty well. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on?
Yeah. So I think that how I would put into words what you said, it's like being evidence of what's possible. Mm-hmm. And specifically with visionary leadership, it's like so often we are the thing that we have evidence for already, but what would it mean to dream outside what there's evidence for? So we become the leader that our father was, or we become the leader that our friend is, or we aspire to that. And I think that that's a really great anchor point. But what would it look like to create a life that is so out of what you have evidence for that it is visionary in a way? And to me, it's very close to like manifestation too. It's like we often manifest for what we think that we can do, or what seems plausible or reasonable, or what we've seen others do. But what would happen if you got in touch with like the big desire, like the thing that you're too afraid to even acknowledge, like the dream of the dream of the dream? Mm-hmm. And this was, again, this circles back to that experience with Andrew, where like he couldn't even fathom the possibility of having a relationship where he was so sexually embodied and free that like he just shut it down and was like, well, whatever, that's just going to go in my shadow because it's not possible. But what would happen if you dreamed like, I can have all of it. I can have the wife and the family and the commitment, and also have a level of freedom that feels really good for me, just for example. And so when we made that commitment to each other, when we discovered, wow, we have similar visions and they're kind of both in alignment with the norm, but also outside of it at the same time, what if we were evidence for what's possible in relationships? What if that was the purpose of our relationship, and we always came back to that, came back to being evidence for what's possible? And so it's not even like we're leading in a way of like, come follow us and do this thing. It's like we're just a being. We are embodied in the potential of what's possible in terms of relationships and being. And that's just one example of what could be an infinite number of expressions depending on who are you, what is your desire. If you do what you love, the rest will follow, and you will organically become this leader in a way. Right.
Just being the utmost, the fullest, unapologetically yourself.
Yeah.
The ultimate way of being is enrolling, right? Mm-hmm. I'm inspired just by the way you show up, just by your presence, right? Not necessarily the words that you say. And no, I love that. I love that. And like I said, that's inspiring in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like that kind of ties into just, I just lost my train of thought.
It ties into humanity, being human. You know, actually, that does tie into something that I was going to say, which is I used to feel so often that I needed to be like so perfect. And I wouldn't want to tell people like, oh, like I'm hiring this coach, or I would go to therapy and I'd be like, I'm afraid that the therapist is going to judge me. And like, that's like the point, you know, of going to therapy or hiring a coach, is to like get help. But I didn't want to be seen as someone that needed help.
Right.
And having the courage to also be like, oh, like being a leader is also asking for help. Right, you know, and like there's so many different ways that we become leaders that are outside of the traditional box of like traditional leadership, you know?
Yeah.
So messing up,
human.
You know, I love it.
We're
it's like
human.
Being human is also leadership, in my opinion.
For sure. And having the courage to ask for support.
Yeah.
Like if you look at Steve Jobs, he's like, I hired people who are smarter than me.
Yeah.
You know, that's what a visionary does.
Agreed.
Proximity, once again, right? Who you're surrounding yourself with. And there's something that just came to mind as it applies to leadership, is having a strong why.
Yeah.
Why are you doing what you're doing? What do you want?
Agreed.
Ultimately, right? And having a strong why and expressing that to the people around you gets them inspired. There has to be some sort of worthy cause that are going to get people fired up for whatever it is that you're doing. Because ultimately, as a leader, there are people under you.
Yeah.
Being able to lead from the front, lead from the back, lead from the side, and having a strong why. There's a great quote Friedrich Nietzsche says, and that's, with a strong enough why, we can bear almost anyhow. So you talk about dreaming big, dreaming beyond the dream. Some people are like, how the hell are you going to get there? That's insane to even fathom, right? A dream isn't worth, like a dream, like you want to be able to have a dream that scares you.
Yeah.
Right? So when you have that strong why, you could bear that. Yeah.
It's also the strong why is also what helps you get out of that breakdown, that bottom of the J.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so it's almost like the first J curve of life is like figuring out, okay, well, like how the fuck do I get out of here? I need to find my why. Yeah. And then the J curves get easier because you're like, oh, I'm familiar with this trajectory. I've done this path before. I know my why. And maybe that why evolves over time, but we get more and more comfortable with the living perspective of dreaming the dream and finding your why.
Yeah.
In a way.
And in that J curve too, and I know you touched on it briefly earlier, is like, it's not going to be a perfect
J always.
It might be a little zigzaggy J.
Or a spirally J. I've done some spiral Js.
Some spiral Js, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, you might say, Jeremy, like, well, why does it feel like I've had multiple rock bottoms and had multiple like crazy trajectory changes? It's because like the rock bottoms are going to happen, and rock bottoms aren't necessarily they're relative. Yeah. Right. A rock bottom to me is going to look miles different to the next guy.
Yeah.
Who could be like, you know, in a ditch somewhere on drugs. You know what I mean? Like that's his rock bottom. Mine's going to be a little bit different. Mine, I had a job, I had a partner, like I was fine, like to the outside eye I was, but I definitely was not. But
yeah, sometimes your J is in your closet, and sometimes your J is actually, the bottom of your J is actually, things are all good and I'm still not happy and I'm going to have a breakdown about it in a way. Like everything, like I have everything. So why am I still not fulfilled? It's because there's not a grander why probably that's pulling you up.
For sure. And I know we touched on this before we started recording too, and that's just like creating this space as a leader for where vulnerability is okay.
Yeah.
Where feedback is okay. Where admitting your mistakes is okay. Mm-hmm. The outcome of admitting your mistakes, I don't know what's going to happen, but creating that space where like taking that ownership again.
Yeah.
Where taking that ownership is okay, because I've been a part of organizations where people are terrified to give feedback.
Yeah.
For fear of getting fired. Mm-hmm. For fear of ruffling feathers, for fear of being like, I don't necessarily say the whistleblower, but you get my point.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a true visionary leader encourages feedback and encourages people to speak up and to be their full expression of themselves.
Yeah. There's a great podcast episode on this podcast called The Sacred Rebel that's kind of all about that piece specifically. Okay. But just for people listening, if you're wanting more on that. Beautiful. Well, I'm feeling like a natural sort of close to this. Is there anything you want to add in terms of these topics?
I'm feeling really good. I really enjoyed our time together today. Any final thoughts?
You can definitely tell us where to find you and like what you're offering in the world that people could get involved with.
Yeah, I got a few things going on right now. If there's any business owners, online business owners that are looking that might have hit a ceiling in like lead flow. Uh-huh. My friend and I, we have a new offering that's coming out in a couple weeks. It's called Lead Flow Academy, where we help you refine your offer and generate leads through AI.
Oh, fuck yeah, that's cool.
And then help you close those leads. So I was a closer for Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi before I started the transition to more of like a human evolution space, but it's still something I really love to do.
Yeah.
Is to teach people how to enroll.
Yeah.
So that's coming out in the next 2 weeks. And then we have our Alchemy Mastery course that's coming out with myself and Brittany Mondino in an arm's reach. That's starting up in 3 weeks. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. 2 things going on. And you could find me at Jeremy Trinchere on Instagram. I could just send you a link to how to spell it, but it's
sweet. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm really excited. And if I just had one final thought, is just like be intentional with who you spend your time with.
I love it. Proximity.
There's power in proximity.
Bringing it full circle.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this wisdom. And thank you to the listener for opening yourself up to all of this sacred wisdom. Have a sexy and spiritual day. And we'll catch you next week on Talk Tantra to Me. Ta-ta.
Thanks, Leola. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.